Welcome back to another episode of From the Couch Sports. I've got a lot I want to get into. I know that there's been a little bit of a break in between episodes. I've had a lot going on work wise in my personal life, and obviously that's pays the bills, so it's got to come first to me. But we've got so many exciting things coming up with the football season coming soon. Great fights happening. Basketball season's quickly approaching, so we've been kind of in a slump as far as the sports that we cover on this channel. But very soon things are going to start ramping up. And to start this video off, I believe this is the 31st episode. I do want to talk about the crazy night of fights we had last night, and I don't want to go too detailed on all the fights on the card. I do want to kind of specifically talk about two fights that really stood out to me last night, and just not only just in terms of fights, but also these were in my eyes these were all-time moments for both the Luke Rockhold Paulo Costa fight and the Leon Edwards Kamaru Usman fight. I think both of those fights kind of they showed us something that we really haven't seen in many, many years in the sport of MMA. And to start with the Luke Rockhold, Paulo Costa fight, Luke Rockhold showed a ton of heart in this fight. And for a guy coming off of a 3-year hiatus from the sport, in a sport where we constantly hear the term ring rust and such like that, there are constantly memes all over the internet that Luke Rockhold has a glass chin, that he gets touched, he's getting knocked out. Paulo Costa is the eraser, the destroyer. This guy's going to come in there and just destroy him in the first round. He was the heavy betting favorite. And, Paulo did his thing. Paulo had an incredible fight his own. That guy is a dangerous middleweight fighter. But what Luke Rockhold showed in this fight was determination, and he proved that he's got the heart. And so many times on this channel we talk about all-time great MMA fighters and those difficult moments where they kind of fight too late into their career and you end up seeing them get brutally KO'd. And to be honest, that's kind of been the story of Luke Rockhold's career up until this point. He was a former champion, but he had been KO'd a lot in his recent fights. And so coming into this one, facing one of the top fighters in his division, and this was, the betting favorite was for Paulo Costa to knock Luke Rockhold out. And, what Luke Rockhold, put out there was just totally different. The body shots he was throwing, and every single shot that he landed, and I would say the same for Paulo. Paulo was a lot like this too, but every single shot it felt like they were trying to put their opponent's lights out. The body kicks constantly from Luke Rockhold. Even Costa had a lot of nice body kicks. The spinning stuff from Rockhold, the spinning kicks to the body. He took a lot of shots at head kicks. And then, as the fight kind of went on, both guys were, hurt at multiple points in the fight, and they were both kind of gassing out. In this fight, Paulo Costa actually had the advantage on the gas tank. But the crazy thing is, like, in some of this, Luke Rockhold, they're fighting at high elevation, which a lot of MMA fighters don't train like year round at, and Luke Rockhold, you could tell, was so tired, but he didn't give in. There was times where it was like, is the ref gonna stop this fight? Like, the guy is actively putting his hands on his knees in the middle of a fight. He's putting himself in a ton of danger, but then he just come back and land a bomb left hand and tell Costa F you and like wobble him. Like, just crazy atmosphere, crazy to see in this moment. And then to end the fight, getting on top of Paulo Costa, he had a funny moment where he smeared his blood on his face. in a sport where we constantly see these all-time greats just get brutally KO'd, to see a fight like that where you've got an all-time great guy who comes in and puts on a war, absolute war, one of the best fights of the night with someone who is a title contender. Well, not saying that he's going to fight for the belt next or anything, but Paulo in recent memory has fought for the belt. This is one of the top contenders in this weight class. So to see that, I thought was incredible to watch. And yeah, just going out like that. In the end, he said, I'm too old for this. This was my last fight. And I think that him going out on that loss, it's still a loss, but you know, to me, I'm gonna remember, instead of him getting KO'd in his last two fights, you're gonna remember like the war that he put up with Paulo Costa on a pay-per-view co-main event. And that was awesome to see. And another thing that Luke Rockhold just kept stating in like the media and everything was, I'm a man, and I'm not one. I'm not gonna quit in the fight. I'm gonna continue to fight and push forward, and you're gonna have to seriously put me out of there if you want me to get out of there. And he showed that. He showed that he had the heart, the determination to continue to fight in that fight, and it was, it was an all-time great one to me. It was a ton of fun to watch. And then, after seeing that, it's like you think, how can that be topped? And if you watch Leon versus Kamaru 1, it's kind of like, obviously they're different fighters, but it was a very, early in Kamaru's career, a lot of his fights, were a lot of grappling heavy. He's not really threatening the submission. He's not really doing anything to like finish his opponents. They were a lot of decisions and whatnot. To each their own, but at one point he was called Kamaru Snoozman and all these other nicknames that were based on him having boring fights. And I'm not saying that he's always having boring fights, but that's kind of how the first one went. And this was like 7 years ago, so tons of things have changed. Kamaru has been training with Trevor Whitman. He's refined his striking ability. He's had great fights where he's put his opponents out with strikes. He knocked out Jorge Masvidal, who was considered one of the best strikers in the division. He finished Gilbert Burns, another guy who, great striker, and also a guy who clipped Kamaru early in the first round. So he's just kind of had these accolades, and seemingly got more and more confident in his striking ability. But he's also had the great grappling, and then he's gone through wars with Colby Covington. So he's just, since that fight, Kamaru's kind of put a place in his careers. He's certainly one of the best welterweight champions of all time. For people saying that he was better than GSP, I think that was a little too soon. But GSP lost by knockout in his career as well, and he went on to continue to cement himself in his legacy. So we very well may see Kamaru do the same thing. But so leading into this fight, Leon Edwards has, since that last fight, he's been undefeated, and he's had a kind of very interesting kind of path to this point. A lot of his opponents have fallen out. There was times where he was scheduled to fight Khamzat Chimaev, and that fell out due to COVID. He was scheduled to fight Tyron Woodley, which I believe was right after Woodley lost the belt. So Leon's always, like the last 3 years, he's been kind of in the title conversation without actually getting the opportunity. Leon fans have been adamant, like, dude, this guy, if you give him, once he gets his shot, there's a good chance he wins. And, a lot of people around him, echoed the same thing. And then Leon gets the opportunity to fight Nate Diaz, which, on paper, Nate he shouldn't really be catapulting fighters into title fights because he's not a top contender. So why would fighting him be a number one contender fight? But he is one of the biggest names in the sport. So you go in that fight, and Leon absolutely dominated the entire fight until like the last minute of the 5th round, where Nate caught him with the left. And that was the story of the fight. You get a bunch of people saying, like, oh, Nate was going to win that fight if it kept going on. That didn't look good for Leon. This and that, like, kind of acting like it hurt his stock. And then, coming into this fight, he did get the opportunity to fight for the title. And this version of Kamaru that we see is the utmost confidence. This is a guy who is constantly saying that he wants to fight Canelo Alvarez, despite pretty much nobody being interested in that fight. He constantly asks for it, says that he could beat Canelo, pound for pound versus pound for pound, whatever. He constantly says. He said that he wanted to skip 185 and go and fight somebody at 205, and just crazy confidence. And you can see it in the fight too. And so in the first round, Leon actually looks pretty good. He ends up taking Kamaru down for the first time in his career. Although arguably Colby took him down, it just wasn't officially, they didn't officially count it. But Kamaru gets taken down, and then he gets his back taken by Leon. So it's like Leon kind of took the first round, but then Kamaru opened up in the second and the third, utilizing his grappling, and even his striking. Like I was kind of surprised. Like a lot of Kamaru's striking is like jabs and straights. It feels like in this fight he was throwing a lot of uppercuts, body work. He looked pretty decent as a striker. Wasn't throwing a bunch of crazy stuff, but he was dominating this fight from after the first round until the very end, until he got clipped basically. And then like the commentary was just, you can see that Leon's lost this fight. If I think it was Dean Thomas said that if Leon doesn't get finished in this fight, he will see that as a moral victory, that he went against the champ for 5 rounds. So we just saw this whole kind of back and forth. The commentary team like hyping up Kamaru Usman took his soul type of deal, and Leon's nickname is Rocky, and this literally is like a mirror of a Rocky film. And for anyone that doesn't know how the Rocky movies went, because they took place a long time ago, but I think a lot of people still watch them because they're all-time great movies. Rocky 1 was Rocky Balboa versus Apollo Creed, and the story of Rocky is, you get Rocky, this guy who's just kind of worked his way up out of nowhere. He's not like undefeated or anything. He's had plenty of losses in his career, but he gets there into a title fight against Apollo Creed, and he's a massive underdog, and the first fight is just an absolute war, which ends up Apollo Creed winning the fight. And then the second fight, I believe, is the opposite, where Rocky goes on and he wins in the rematch against Apollo Creed, and it kind of solidified and created this giant movie franchise. But this is Leon Edwards. This is a guy from Jamaica. He came from very humble beginnings, and he's a guy that, he doesn't get the fanfare because he's not flashy on the mic. He's not super cocky. He's just confident in his abilities and in his work ethic. And he's gone through a lot. Not the same story as Ngannou, but, some of these fighters have just crazy upbringings. To see them go from that moment, where they were, he was saying that he was living in a wooden shack in Jamaica when he was a kid, to becoming a champion of the world. It's just, you can't write movies better than this. And you go into the 5th round, and it's like, dude, this guy has been dominating you. You are down 3 rounds to 1, and if you lose this next round, you lose your chance at the belt. What you've worked your whole life for. And for Kamaru he's a guy that's not just going into the 5th round to coast because he knows he's going to win, but he's hungry champion. He's trying to solidify his legacy. He's trying to get his 16th straight win so he can, I believe, tie Anderson Silva for the most wins in win streak in UFC history. So he's going on his journey as well. wanting to win this fight. And I mean, he's there. He tried to finish the fight at multiple times as well. And the commentary teams, oh, Leon, it looks like the energy sucked out of him. He doesn't have it anymore. And then Leon, with literally less than a minute left, I think it was like 58 seconds in the fifth round of a title fight, he throws just this beautiful combination where he throws the left, which causes Kamaru to lean to his right, and then Leon follows that up almost instantaneous with a high left kick, which completely knocks out Kamaru Usman and wins him the belt. It's like, we talk about, like, I talk about this a lot, but what makes the sport of MMA so incredible to me is that the outcome of a fight can change at any moment. Where if you play basketball, you play football, you get a 20-point lead, you've got the lead in the bag. There's no one play that your opponent can do to win. And it's the other way around in MMA. Like if you were to put let's say you scored it or whatever, you were putting it into comparison with basketball or football, this would be like a 30-point blowout for Kamaru Usman. And if it was another sport, there'd be zero chance for Leon to win. But in this sport, what makes it so incredible is that you can throw a Hail Mary, last second, high kick, and win the belt and become the champion of the world. And that was just one of the best moments I've ever seen. Obviously I know about like the Chael Anderson Silva moment. That was definitely something similar, but it's not the same, man. I mean, getting a triangle submission at the late fifth round is a little bit different than head kicking, KOing your opponent. So just insane fight, one of the best fights I've ever seen, and I mean, like, I think Joe Rogan, a lot of fans like kind of rag on him because you'll see something, he'll see something like this, or the Michael Chandler front kick to Tony Ferguson, and he'll instantly say, oh, that was the best high kick in MMA history, or that was the best front kick in MMA history. And a lot of these things come in a recency bias thing, but also, like, if you put all those factors into perspective, the fact that Leon was losing that fight handedly, and that his only chance of winning was to finish his opponent, and Kamaru Usman has never been finished on the feet. He's only been submitted, and it was early in his career. This is a guy who's been on a I think 15, 16 fight win streak, and not only did Leon finish him, but he like completely KO'd him. One shot KO, no need to follow up. He's out unconscious on the ground. Just crazy, the crazy moment. The celebration. I love seeing a new champion in MMA. And I also love seeing dominant champions, so don't get me wrong. But something that you see, when you see the accumulation of someone's life goal come to fruition, when someone has worked their entire life to achieve one singular goal, and you get to see that live in person, especially in devastating fashion like we did last night, that's amazing. And that's, what, in my opinion, what makes the sport such a fun sport to watch. We saw this guy, Leon Edwards. He's 30 years old. He's probably been training for 15 years of his life, if not maybe more, dedicated on this singular goal of becoming the champion of the world in the UFC. And he made that happen. And in the aftermath, there's a couple other little minor things that I want to touch on. The Kamaru Usman wasn't being, there's some things going online saying that he wasn't being a good sportsman, didn't shake Leon's hand, what have you. The guy just got knocked out cold, probably didn't know where he even was, probably couldn't believe that he got knocked out. I mean, if you're undefeated and you've never lost, that first time you lose, and I know Kamaru's lost, but like not in that fashion. The first time you lose, I mean, it's got to be hard to believe. Especially this is like I said, this is a guy who thought he could beat Canelo Alvarez in a boxing match. Like, he has a crazy confidence in himself. There's no way he ever imagined getting knocked out cold. So I don't think that he was being a disrespectful sportsman by not shaking his hand. I don't think he knew where he was. I think that's kind of it. The other thing too, there's like a sad scene. You kind of saw his daughter getting carried out, just bawling her eyes out. She just saw her dad get brutally knocked out, and I mean, like that looked like her dad was like, if you're a kid and you've never seen that type of thing before, which you probably haven't. I mean, I don't imagine that Kamaru's running film and showing his daughter all kinds of crazy knockouts. She probably thought like her dad might have just died in the ring. That is super traumatic. Um, I don't know how I feel about bringing your family to watch your fights. I get like, obviously, like if you're an adult, your dad or your brother or what have you coming to your fights, I think is a little different than bringing kids that they might know what you're doing. Like, my dad's a fighter, but they might not understand the consequences and all the wrinkles into what goes into the sport of mixed martial arts. So I think that was kind of sad to see. But for Leon, the celebration, the realization that he just achieved his lifelong goal was amazing. And most likely this fight's gonna get ran back. The trilogy, Kamaru Usman might even be the favorite again because he for sure was winning that fight until he got caught with that head kick. But incredible moment in the sport of MMA, and to kind of wrap a bow on it, like this year has just been awesome for MMA. Last year was awesome. Like the sport of MMA has been growing, I think, exponentially, and I think we will continue to see it grow like that. And with the way that things go in fighting, with the different ways that you can finish a fight, we probably will continue to see moments that we haven't seen before. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to seeing what's next for this division. Obviously, we've got the big Hamzat Nate Diaz fight. Hamzat gets through Nate. He probably is in position to fight for the belt, depending on what they end up doing with the Usman Leon Edwards trilogy. But that kind of touches on what I wanted to cover for the UFC. Um, we've got some incredible fights coming up as well. We've had a great year of fights. So I'm looking forward to it. We'll cover more of that on the channel as things go. But then I do want to move into, my other favorite sport, which is football. And, anybody that knows me knows that I am a massive New York Jets fan. Like if I were to rank my fandom in sports, I'm a Jets fan before anything else. I'm a like completely. And it's funny because obviously the Jets suck pretty much on a yearly basis. But, it's part of being a fan, and, bad teams need fans to root for them. One day when the Jets aren't bad, it'll be awesome for me. But, so there's been some Jets topics I want to cover in this video. Um, as a Jets fan, there's kind of a lot that nonsense that we see. I'm not a big fan of the Jets the media that covers the Jets. I don't want to call out any specific names necessarily, because I know that these guys are ultimately they're just doing a job. They're not all Jets fans either, so they're just doing their best to cover the team. But a lot of times when you get a reporter that doesn't necessarily have inside info, they end up starting to make shit up. And in this particular instance, I'm going to talk on the Mekhi Becton injury and the fact that some reporters around the Jets have completely ruined and damaged this guy's reputation, and it's kind of disgraceful. I don't know what Mekhi can do necessarily, but I mean, like if this is something where he could, like if he could sue for defamation of character or something, like I don't know, I don't even know if that's possible, but like these guys have just buried his character, and the fact that he got another year-end injury has made it even worse, because people have been piling on him, calling him a bust, when the reality of the situation is last year, so he came into the league as a rookie, had a phenomenal year, was one of the best left tackles, young left tackles in the entire NFL, and then year two, he has one of the worst right guards in the entire NFL, and that guy gets bull rushed into the back of Mekhi's knee, causing a year-end injury in which the Jets doctors falsely diagnosed, because they originally said it's like a 4 to 6 week injury, and then he ended up missing the entire season, even started this season on the pup list. So clearly it wasn't just a minor injury; it was a pretty serious one. And when you're that size of a guy, like, sometimes the injuries heal a little bit different. You know, every single injury isn't the same. So you see someone say like, "Oh, Cam Akers came back from a torn Achilles in 6 months." Well, that doesn't happen hardly ever, and there's different severities of each injury, and there's different ways that people heal. People heal differently. But Mekhi Becton comes back this year, and in the summer, the Jets beat made up this story that he's 400 pounds. And where the number 400 pounds comes from, I do not understand, because nobody within the Jets that I have seen has once said that he's 400 pounds. There's not been a picture of him standing on a scale saying 400 pounds. It's just completely something fabricated, made up out of air. And, whether it's true or not, it's not something that really the beat should have been talking about. Like, they're just pushing this negative story on Mekhi Becton because they don't have an inside scoop on anything going on. So they promote this nonsense. And so Mekhi comes in incredible shape. He comes in wearing t-shirts that say Big Bust on them. He changes his, social media name to Big Bust because he wants to prove his doubters wrong. And not only is his doubters the Jets beat, but a lot of idiot Jets fans want to go and believe everything that these guys say. So Jets fans have been calling him a bust. And it's a guy like, you know, is he going to end up being a bust because he can't stay healthy on the field? You can make that argument. In my eyes, there's different, like, if you're injury prone and you just can't stay healthy in your career, I don't know if that's the same thing as you can stay healthy and you just suck, because that's not the case with Mekhi. Mekhi is a very good football player. And I mean, he's going through a rough time, and for the Jets fans to be bashing on him, calling him a bust, just crazy. Like, this isn't even new either. Like in 2018, one of these same Jets beat reporters came out with another bogus story saying that Le'Veon Bell was like 260 pounds, and they just make stuff up that's not true. Le'Veon Bell, like, has been posting pictures and videos of himself working out even in the off season. It's like, dude, you just look at one of those pictures and you can tell the guy's not 260. It was the same thing with Mekhi. Like, there's videos of Mekhi training with Duke Mayweather, one of his O-line coaches, rehabbing in the off season. The guy does not look like he's 400 pounds. He is a giant human, but he looks like he's in incredible shape. And he had another kind of fluke injury, and another time that the New York Jets medical staff misdiagnosed it, because they originally said they didn't think the injury was too bad, and then he gets reevaluated later in the day and they're like, okay, yeah, he's not playing this year, this is a year-ending injury. And so for Mekhi, most likely he's going to be in a tough spot because he's going to be coming in the year 4. The Jets probably won't pick up his 5th-year option, because typically those 5th-year options are pretty high on the salary cap. So he's going to come into his 4th year most likely fighting for a spot, because if you're the Jets, they may have to bring in more competition, just because you got to do what's in the best interest of your team. And if you don't have the confidence that one player is going to stay healthy, you can't bet on your future at that position. And that's kind of what they did. They brought in Dwayne Brown this offseason. They gave him a 2-year deal. And then, everything's leaning towards them extending George Fant. So they'll have 2 solid tackles that most likely Mekhi will kind of fight next year for an opportunity to play. But I'm rooting hard for the guy. If things do pan out and he does end up having a career, this is a guy that can be one of the all-time greats, if you look at it from a talent perspective. But it's tragic seeing this. Is a guy, like, he just had his kid. He got in phenomenal shape, prepared for the year, and then it ends before the year even starts. It's just It's one of those things that we Jets fans deal with. And another thing that we deal with is our franchise quarterback in preseason going out and potentially tearing his ACL. And this is my whole point with the media around the New York Jets. It's just constant bashing nonsense. Zach Wilson ends up like minorly tearing his I think his MCL, and he got a bone bruise from a non-contact play. But literally, and this happened in like the first quarter. During the game, multiple massive news media outlets reported that he had a torn ACL. You had all these Twitter doctors that, maybe they're doctors in real life, but they're trying to diagnose an injury based on just watching what happened, which I don't think is always the most accurate way to diagnose something. But they were all confirming torn ACL out for the year. You get the Jets, Jets Twitter, and if these in fan bases, like you got the Twitter fan base, you got the Facebook groups and what have you, and Zach Wilson's getting buried. What an idiot! Why'd he do that? It's Jimmy G season, and we need to trade for Jimmy G to save our season. And it's like, okay, first of all, we've got Joe Flacco, which I don't think he's a whole far off of talent as far as Jimmy G. Like, maybe Jimmy G's a little bit better at this point in his career, but he's not like miles better or anything. Jimmy G's not taking this Jets team to a Super Bowl, that's for sure. And then, yeah, like it's all happening, and then these media, these people don't even like go back and like apologize. They just made up a story that this guy got a torn ACL, and so thankfully, knock on wood, Zach Wilson is potentially gonna come back first couple weeks of the year. They're not even completely ruling out week one. If I'm the Jets, I have him take as much time as possible. I want to bring him in healthy and see what we have. I don't expect to be a playoff contending team this year, but you need to see improvements. And if it takes losing the first three games of the year with your backup QB, and then Zach Wilson comes out and plays 500 football and shows that he's the guy, and we get a lot out of our young talent, then I'm cool with that. What I don't want to happen is him rush back for week 1 or 2 and then get re-injured and not play the year. Because if that happens, then we're gonna be talking similar to what we're saying with Mekhi. Is like, do the Jets potentially look at replacing Zach? And I think that's way too soon to even think about that. So they need to play this. They need to play their cards right and make sure he's healthy come ready whenever he's ready to actually step onto the field. But that pretty much wraps it up. Like, there's not a I have been watching preseason football. There's not any crazy, huge injuries of note to talk about just yet, or any other, like big news. I've covered the Deshaun stuff on the story on the page before. He's missing 11 games. Funny, he's coming back for the game against the Texans. But outside of that, it's like, not a whole lot at the moment. But we are quickly approaching, week 1 of the NFL. And I'll try to, come out with like some kind of predictions, overview for each team and whatnot as we get closer. But as always, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoy the content, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Let me know what your thoughts are on the fights we had this weekend. If you are a Jets fan, please hit the subscribe button and, let me know, do you agree with my take on, the Becton injury, the Jets beat, and what have you as well. But as always, thanks for tuning in.